If you had to guess, where would you place the center of Puerto Rico? Not the entire group of islands that make up the total jurisdiction of Puerto Rico, but the greater island. Well, if you guessed Orocovis, you'd be right. But if I asked you where within that town, that would take a lot more exploring, right? Well, that's just one of the places that we'll be visiting today. As always, we're going to start at the town's Catholic church, because that's what we do. Then, we'll explore the beautiful and recently named Juan Santiago de Rivera Square, La Casa de la Cultura Orocoveña, a small museum with itinerating exhibitions on the corner of 4 de Julio and Pedro Arroyo streets, and Cerro La Guaira, a small mountainside park on the outskirts of town. Then we'll take to the skies to show you a more holistic view of this beautiful yet small town in the center of Puerto Rico. From there, it's off to the countryside, with stops at La Sombra, the town's first and most famous producer of longanizas, a Puerto Rican sausage that keeps locals and visitors coming back for more. Then, it's off to Mirador El Gato for a commanding view of the Orocovis Mountains, and of course, Toro Verde right next door, the longest zipline in the Americas. Did I write it? Well, you're gonna have to wait to find out. Then we were off to the Pellejas Ward, a remote area in the mountains of Orocovis where you'll find the geographical center of the greater island of Puerto Rico. You'll also find other things, but I'll tell you about those in a few minutes. From there, we were off to Miradero Villalba, a scenic overlook with a commanding view of Villalba, the town we visited last time. El Chorro de Doña Juana, one of Puerto Rico's tallest and most beautiful waterfalls. Lago Matrullas, a man-made lake on the opposite end of town. And finally, Cacao Bridge, a remote bridge where daredevils dive into treacherous water just for fun. This episode will be diferente, not only because it'll be longer and the roads will be curvier, but because you'll pick up some Puerto Rican idioms that aren't even in the dictionary. So stick around and let's have some fun. It was the morning of June 16, 2025, and Puerto Rico was still under a dense cloud of Sahara dust. You'll recall from our Villalba video that Sahara dust turns the skies into an ugly gray mush that hardly lets you see the horizon. But, like they say in Hollywood, the show must go on. So, at 6 in the morning, Zoraida and I were off to Orocovis. Orocovis is not a small town by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's one of the largest by area. Conversely, I'd venture to say that the town itself, what Puerto Ricans call El Casco, is one of the smallest. Oh, and just so you know, I'd advise you to pull out a pen and paper because in this video, you're about to learn a few Puerto Rican idioms that you probably won't find in the dictionary. El Casco is what Puerto Ricans call the original town. It's the small cluster of streets and buildings that made up the original settlement. Orocovis sits right in the middle of the larger island of Puerto Rico. As you probably know by now, Puerto Rico is made up of the larger island, Vieques, Culebra, and Culebrita to the east, Caja de Muertos south, and Mona, Monito, and Desecheo to the west. Technically, it's not an archipelago because that distinction goes to the Caribbean as a whole. It wouldn't make sense to have an archipelago within an archipelago. Orocovis is bordered by 7 towns. Yes, 7. Those are Morovis and Corozal to the north, Barranquitas east, Coamo and Villalba south, Jayuya to the west, and Ciales northwest. The easiest way to get to Orocovis from the San Juan Metroplex is by taking Toll Road PR22 going west until you reach the town of Vega Baja. Get off on exit 42, turn south under the bridge, and follow State Road 137 until you reach the intersection with State Road 155 at the outskirts of the town of Morovis. Turn right on 155 and follow it until you reach the town of Orocovis. The roads in and out of Orocovis are curvy and hilly, with ravines on one or the other side. This is the kind of road that Puerto Ricans call guindas, especially the kind that goes straight up and suddenly go straight down. If you're not used to driving in this type of road, be extra careful and honk your horn at close curves. You won't see when someone's coming from the opposite direction. And guess what? They won't see you either. So the horn will tell them that someone is coming. When we got to the center of town, we had to drive around for a while to find a parking spot. Finally, we parked along the side of San Juan Bautista de Barros Parish. It was 7:41 in the morning when we first arrived in the town of Orocovis. Work was already underway sprucing up the town for this year's Fiestas Patronales. Every town in Puerto Rico celebrates annual festivities dedicated to the town's patron saint. It's a tradition that comes from the island's Spanish colonial times. This year, the fiestas in Orocovis will take place between June 19th and the 22nd, and they coincide with the town's bicentennial celebration. San Juan Bautista de Barros Parish was originally established in 1838, but the original structure burned down and it was rebuilt in 1937. At first glance, the church seems small, with a single bell tower in the center and twin windows on both sides. However, when you enter the building, it's not small at all. It's actually quite inviting with just the right amount of stained glass windows and religious art. The altar points southeast, which pretty much complies with the Spanish tradition of pointing east. City Hall is presently under renovation and south of the temple, while the town's main square sits on the western side of the parish. According to a local patron, the town square was dedicated just last year to the town founder Juan Rivera y Santiago. In many ways, Orocovis Town Square reminded us of Monseñor Miguel A. Mendoza Square in the neighboring town of Barranquitas, and it stands to reason since Orocovis was part of that town until 1825. The four gazebos at the corners give the square that beautiful European charm. At the south end, there's a small water fountain that seemed to be in working condition. Sadly, it wasn't running. From the air, you can tell that the original township, what Puerto Ricans call El Casco, is actually quite small. But the outskirts, what Puerto Ricans call El Campo, is huge and beautiful. After leaving the town square, we walked to La Casa de la Cultura Orocoveña, which would be the house of Orocovian culture, if you will. We imagined it like some sort of museum promoting all things Orocovis. Instead, it was comprised of itinerating exhibitions and no collection of its own. However, the attendant was a young man called Juan, who turned out to be quite friendly and answered all of our questions about Orocovis. He also went out of his way and accompanied us to Cerro La Guaira, a picnic area that sits on the side of a mountain. After leaving the original township, our first stop was at La Sombra, a local restaurant and producer of Orocovis longanizas. Longanizas are a type of sausage which are Spanish in origin. They're similar to chorizo, but often longer with a chunkier texture. This is due to the meat being chopped instead of ground. And guess who's the reigning champion when it comes to longaniza in Puerto Rico? You guessed it, Orocovis takes number one. In fact, my wife hadn't told me a thing, but she came equipped with a cooler and ice pack to carry her personal load of longanizas back home. Our next stop was at the Geographic Center of Puerto Rico, located in Pellejas Ward, a remote location in the middle of nowhere. Puerto Ricans would actually say it differently. They tell you that it's in las cinzoras, meaning that it's far, far away. So there's another idiom for your Puerto Rican phrase book. In any case, when we finally got there, the experience was kind of bittersweet. On the plus side, the area is amazing, with wonderful mountains all around you. On the minus side, there's no marker whatsoever telling you that you've arrived. All there is a rusty frame where a sign used to be. That's it.
Well, here we are at Puerto Rico's belly button, the geographical center of the larger island of Puerto Rico, to say it correctly. Of course, if you come here, you're not going to see anything. What you're going to see is something like that. That used to be the frame where it used to say that this was the geographical center of Puerto Rico. But a hurricane took care of that. So you'll have to follow my coordinates and get here if you're interested.
Then there was the lady. After taking the mandatory selfie and recording a few words for the camera, I decided to fly the drone straight up to shoot a 360 of the area. Pay attention. The operative words here are straight up. Seconds after takeoff, a lady from one of the nearby houses, about a quarter of a mile away actually, started yelling all sorts of cuss words. Apparently, she had an issue with the drone and the fact that according to her, we had no permission to fly over her home. Well, newsflash, I was flying over the road and not over her home that was about a quarter of a mile away. And even if I would have flown over her home, she doesn't own or control that airspace. The FAA does. So we simply ignored her and went about our business. 10 minutes later, when I had already packed up my stuff and was about to drive away, you could still hear her cussing in the distance. Who knows? Maybe it was just a local head case. From Pellejas Ward, I had to drive back to town. Why? Because I forgot my helipad in the middle of town square. The fact that it was still there over an hour later says a lot about the people of Orocovis. I wouldn't have even bothered if I had left it anywhere in San Juan. Since we were back in the center of town, we decided to visit two places that we could have covered when we first arrived in town. The reason why we didn't was because we wanted to get to church first, before they closed it after Mass. The first of those two places was Mirador El Gato, a beautiful viewpoint overlooking the Orocovis Mountains. It actually has nothing to do with cats, which is gato in Spanish. It's called that way because it's located in Gato Ward. And guess what I saw the minute I got out of my car? You guessed it! There was a cat standing directly in front of my vehicle. From Mirador El Gato, we drove to Toro Verde, the longest zipline in the Americas. It's located about a minute down the road. Was I gonna ride it? Hell no! I have a healthy respect for gravity. But what I did intend to do was find someone who spoke English to tell me about the zipline on camera. But when we got there, the place was packed to the rafters, so I figured that the idea of just dropping in unannounced wasn't gonna work. After leaving Toro Verde, we headed for another mirador, in this case Miradero Villalba, located on Municipal Road 143 on the southwest corner of Orocovis. As the name suggests, this is a beautiful viewpoint overlooking the town of Villalba. Even with all the Sahara dust in the atmosphere, you could still make out Tuabaca Lake, Guayaba Lake, and the Santa Isabel wind farm in the distance. Sadly, the place was closed. A nearby neighbor told us that it has been closed since Hurricane Maria back in 2017. Now here's my question. Why? What could possibly be damaged in a place that's made of concrete and steel pipes? The gazebos in the lower level? Well, why not close those separately? Luckily, the drone saved the day once again. I was able to overfly the area so you could see what it looks like. It's actually quite nice, and the view is to die for. Another view that's to die for is El Chorro de Doña Juana, a beautiful waterfall that's one of the tallest in Puerto Rico. It's located even further to the west, close to the entrance to Toro Negro Forest. I covered it more extensively in the Villalba video. We had just a couple of places left to see before driving back home. The first was a water reservoir called Lago Matrullas, Matrullas Lake in the King's English. Puerto Rico has no natural lakes, so any lakes mentioned now or in future videos will always be man-made water reservoirs. Quite frankly, Matrullas Lake is in the middle of nowhere. The road leading there is riddled with world-class guindas that will take your brakes to the limit. So, if you still decide to visit, make sure to have a car in good conditions and honk your horn at every curve. The place is beautiful and solitary. And if by any chance it rains while you're there, it'll just add to the driving excitement. There was one place left that was recommended by our friend Juan back in town. It's called the Cacao Bridge, and it's also on a solitary road in the northwest end of town near the neighboring municipality of Ciales. At first glance, the Cacao Bridge is just that, a bridge. But the surroundings are a different story. It goes over the Toro Negro River, and opportunities for landscape photographers like me are bountiful. On the south side of the bridge, almost underneath it, there's a huge pond where the locals actually dive from the bridge. The water is so deep that it looks black instead of blue. Nothing out of this world, just a pretty place miles away from everything. Getting back home was another matter. It took almost an hour of driving along curvy roads with lots and lots of guindas just to get back to Toll Road 22, and another hour of steady traffic to get back to San Juan. And talking about San Juan, if you're planning to visit the old city, save yourself the hassle of traditional city tours. They're expensive, and you'll be herded along with people that won't necessarily share your interests. Instead, order the Old San Juan Walking Tour. It's packed with useful information about all the main attractions, as well as every GPS coordinate and 2 hours of exclusive online video. That way, you'll be able to visit before you visit and hit the ground running when you arrive in the old city. See you next time.